How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we have so much to get into in this jam-packed Big Mets update segment. February 23rd, 2025. Not only are we going to get into all the key takeaways and highlights that you guys see beside me for guys like Baty, Jesse Winker, Mark Vientos, Max Kranick, among others that were headlining the Mets split doubleheader today, in which they lost a game and tied, and the other there against the Marlins. From there, we will get into Nick Madrigal, Mets new infielder, trying to make a name for himself this spring. He goes down with injury right away today. So yes, everything is now set up for a Jose Iglesias reunion to happen, a greater possibility now more than ever before, and we will further deep dive why exactly that is. And Sean Manaea, our Samoan southpaw out of this rotation, got a chance to work with his childhood hero recently, that being, and yes, Johan Santana, and we're going to get into how Sean Manaea might just have a new changeup as we head into the new season. Thank you guys so much for smashing like and subscribe on as your first chime in. It's greatly appreciated. Let me know your initial reactions to the Port St. Lucie takeaways today in spring training, as well as Sean Manaea, Jose Iglesias, and everything in between down below. Shout out to our amazing sponsor at BetUS, which has you covered not only with all your sports betting needs, but also with all of your casino needs, folks. Get ready for BetUS Casino and get ready with the rush that comes along with it. Generous promotions and tournaments to make every play even more rewarding, so sign up now and experience a difference. Get your bonus 200% sign up bonus up to $5,000 and a 250% crypto bonus up to $5,000. Whether you're betting, gambling, make sure you guys do it responsibly, but do it here at betus.com.pa. Now, folks, as we get into this one, let's first start with, I thought was a very important breakdown that we saw Sean Manaea have in his discussion with the media earlier today on the prospect of having a new pitch as we head into the 2025 season. So let's start with that. Then we will get into all the other key topics that I alluded to this point, everybody.
Did he give you any good advice?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully maybe I'll have a good changeup this year. But yeah, I mean, it's really just a changeup, grips, and kind of his mentality on the mound, and like that bulldog mentality that we're always talking about. And yeah, just very open about trying to help out. It was cool. There was a couple other guys out there too that were listening. So it's cool when you have the greats like that just handing out knowledge like that.
Did he give you any?
Did you know that you were Sean Manaea's favorite player growing up?
I found out a few days ago. It was pretty cool. He made me feel very, very old. Like that, I was like, man. But it was good. I met him yesterday when I got here, and then his reaction was, oh wow. And then he told me that was his favorite player. And then I told him it was an honor. It's pretty cool. Great kid. He was asking me questions about my changeup. How do I throw it? What do I do? The whole process. And then we share some thoughts. And then it is good. He got great stuff. And then he's going to be a big part of this team. So whatever it takes, to get him better and to help him go all the way through, because this team is built up to win.
I love that Johan joked on really how his age is showing after Sean Manaea goes up to him and says point blank, I grew up idolizing you. You were my favorite player growing up. And I think it's not only a full circle moment for Sean to have this, but as he jokingly said himself, hoping that I'm going to have a better changeup to work with this year. But I don't really think there's much jokes to be had about the reality of Sean Manaea continuing to get better as an ace caliber starter for the Mets when he's at his absolute best. The in-season adjustment that he made last year throughout the halfway mark of the year to adjust to that Chris Sale arm slot when working on his pitches made a drastic difference, especially when we look at that sweeper down and away. You have the sinker that you play up in the zone, you have the sweeper. If you add the changeup, the way that we know Sean Manaea has only utilized right around 11% of his arsenal if we go back to this past season. He's not one to usually utilize a changeup much because it's been more of a meatball for him. He hasn't loved the grip on it. But to have Johan Santana, out of all people, Johan himself, to come out and say, hey, let me teach you a bit about my changeup grip and how this is going to work for you. And then let's get into the moxie, having the cojones on the mound, or, really showing your emotion and being that bulldog, that type of bulldog mentality that both Sean and Johan alluded to is fantastic. We saw Sean Manaea make great strides for a veteran southpaw, something that you don't see too often with guys already like north of a decade plus into their MLB career, now finding adjustments to get the best out of their game that they otherwise haven't provided in a number of years. Sean Manaea is looking to not only replicate what he did this past year for the Mets, but to actually get better in doing so. And and that comes with working with the Mets pitching lab with Jeremy Hefner and Barnes and everyone else in company, as well as working with guys and taking advantage of the great minds of the elites of the Southpaws who were here before the Sean Manaeas, that being in the Johan Santanas. So all I'm going to say is no, I'm not expecting to have the best changeup, that being in Sean next year, but this season. But what I will say is there is a lot of optimism, and this is something that we should be following along with all spring long. I'm telling you guys right now, this changeup has the makings to take a next step in an arsenal for Sean Manaea that's already taken a great next step over this past year. If you add the changeup with the sink, with the sweeper, if they all become plus pitches for you, you see how Clay Holmes just did a great breakdown with SNY over the past day on his new kick change, and how he raises one of his fingers there to get more depth and deception there with that changeup. Well, if we see similar success now with someone like Sean, not on the kick change aspect, but more so on just having a new type of changeup in his mix, the Mets are going to get the best out of these guys. And Sean Manaea, he's been doing great things. So to work with, again, his childhood hero, I think can only cause great things to come out of it. And at absolute worst, he's going to have a changeup like he did last year. At absolute best, we might just see a Sean Manaea that gives us a better season than what we got at all throughout the course of 2024. So Mets fans, let me know your reactions to that all. The comments, it's greatly appreciated. But now, everybody, let's get into the key takeaways from the split doubleheader today for the Mets, and from there, that'll smoothly transition into Nick Madrigal, not Jose Quintana, Mr. Jose Iglesias, Candelita, and everything in between. Because what we saw today was not too much on the offensive end for the Mets. You know, they overall did not have the best day there when we look at their spring training performances, but there were a couple in particular that were notable, especially to me as the average fan. And what I noticed right away was guys like Jesse Winker doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing. Mark Vientos exemplifying not only strong defense, but strong offense as well. Max Kranick, who I plan to say about shortly, had himself 2 strong innings for this team. We're going to get into all the numbers, all the key takeaways, but simply put, no one should care about the Mets winning or losing any spring games. Let's bear in mind their lineup today in their split doubleheader against the Nationals was the Nationals' entire starting lineup that you're likely going to see on opening day, where the Mets only had a handful of starters inside the lineup, headlined by guys like Tyrone Taylor, Jesse Winker, and Francisco Alvarez. Then when we look at the other game that was happening, where it ended in a tie between the Mets and the Marlins of 1-1 apiece, we see one man step up more than anyone on the offensive end today, and that would be, yes, Brett the Hitman Baty. Brett Baty had himself a tremendous day today, going 2 for 3 with a double, topping out at 110 on exit velocity, and that's really what I want to emphasize here with Brett Baty. As we know, Baty, the past 2 springs, has looked really strong, which led him to cracking the roster and that third base spot to begin things, but 40 to 50 games in the year, he is back down to AAA, because after lifting the ball a couple times, he's back to being that ground ball merchant and sadly that double play machine. Brett Baty turned on that one beautifully that we saw against Miami today. I think that's notable because that wasn't a fluke. That was a complete barrel. That was expected batting average of 840 there and a 110 on the exit velo. Hardest hit baseball out of that entire game today between the Mets and the Marlins, if I'm not mistaken. And Brett Baty also poked one opposite field that we saw. He's now 3 for 5 so far this spring throughout the past 24 hours or so. And Baty's doing a lot of what we saw in previous springs, where he's going to show you great defense, whether it's out of the hot corner. He will get some reps at shortstop, because the Mets are looking for a backup shortstop option, and now they may not have that in Nick Madrigal, which we're going to expand on shortly, but also second base reps, in which Baty played a decent chunk at AAA last year too. They want to have him as a versatile option there in the infield to either start the year with the Mets or to be called upon from AAA when Baty has really proved his ability with the bat-to-ball skills. The biggest question with Brett Baty has not been the defense. He showed his ability to exemplify not only solid defense, but above league average defense at the hot corner last year. The main problem with Baty has now been his consistency with lifting a baseball. This is the 3rd straight spring we're going through this with Brett, where he's given us great early signs. Will this continue? Will this now be the year where Brett Baty breaks out? That is what we're going to be following along all spring to find out. But Mets fans certainly want to know your thoughts on Brett Baty after another strong game for him to kickstart this spring training. And when we stay on the topic of the offense, let's transition here now into the numbers that we see against the Marlins and as well as the Washington Nationals. As I alluded to, the Mets lost their one game while also tying the other, and against the Marlins, where they ended up tying 1-1. This is not how the lineup started. This is how it ended. The Mets lineup today began with Luis Angel Acuna batting leadoff against Sandy Alcantara, in which in his first at-bat, after hacking away a 98-mile-per-hour fastball, first time Sandy has had a actual game, a live game of any sort since 2023, so Marlins are happy, and for us Mets fans, let's get Sandy at the trade deadline, right? But all semi-jokes aside, Acuna tried to poke one oppo for a single in his first at-bat and was robbed by, I believe, Bride there at first base for the Marlins. Otherwise, it would have been poked for an early hit there for the Mets. Then we see Mark Vientos there batting second, Brett Baty batting third. Fourth was Jose Siri making his first start as a Met. Luis Torrens batting fifth there. At catcher batting sixth was Jared Young, who's a backup first base option for the Mets right now that they acquired this past offseason. Donovan Walton batting seventh. Batting eighth was Alex Ramirez, and batting ninth was Nick Morabito, who poked himself an infield single. Morabito, a contact and OBP king as a true leadoff man, and both low and high A last year. He's looking to make major strides in the right direction in the minor leagues this year, as he'll probably begin the year, I'd imagine, in AA, barring changes. But Nick Morabito off to a good start, and when we look at the veterans here, I'm looking at key guys like you guys have already seen in the highlights to a degree, with someone like Swaggy V, Mark Vientos. Mark made a name for himself right away in this game. While the Mets didn't really have much offense going on, they did have Mark Vientos hacking one against Sandy Alcantara. Velocity, no problem. Mark takes him the opposite way for a single, and this comes a half inning after he turned a double play beautifully. Vientos finishes the day there with at least one hit that we see. An extra base hit. Brett Baty would be the lone Met in this game against Miami to record multiple hits. And as we transition going from the Miami game on the offensive end, let's now get into the game against the Nationals, because a lot of guys that you probably don't know beside me, because this is how the game ended with the lineup. So how did it start? Great question. It began with Tyrone Taylor batting leadoff in center field. Taylor, who had a diving attempt in center earlier, but to no avail, that allowed Dylan Cruz to have a stand-up triple, and he ultimately scored from that, if I'm not mistaken. No less, we see guys like Francisco Alvarez, who was in the DH position, had himself a hit today with that new stance and looks sharp. As you guys will see from the highlights, I'll be running again shortly once I get back to my main slide that you guys will see beside me. You'll see Alvarez's more stance is a lot more upright. He worked with JD Martinez's group there in Atlanta this past offseason. When I say his group, what JDM recommended, the people that he works with in Atlanta usually each offseason, is what Alvarez did, and he's really looking good with his swing mechanics. Winker, 1-for-1 that we saw there. Not only did Jesse have a walk that led to a run scored thanks to an RBI, but we also saw Jesse begin this game that you saw in the early highlights with an opposite field double. Got all that one. Was a diving attempt there by the left fielder of the Nationals, but to no avail. Afterwards, after Jesse Winker had himself batting third, we had De Los Santos at third base initially, as we had Nick Madrigal kickstarting the game at shortstop. That was quickly replaced by Wyatt Young, who did really good job last year. Wyatt Young, that we saw with the Binghamton Rumble Ponies especially, was a plate setter for them at the top of that lineup. Ryan Clifford there did not get a hit today, one of our top slugging prospects at first base / DH and corner outfield. We had Williams at second base and shortstop, and Luke Ritter in right field, and that is how the starting lineup began, because how it ended, everybody, is how you guys see right there. It's Peraza, Berra, and then we saw Simone Juan. Remember him? Yeah, Mets, one of their top IFA prospects. They signed under the Steve Cohen regime over the past couple of years. Right in the ninth or so, he hit a 3-run tank. So a big game there for Simone Juan, 19 years of age, trying to do more at the minor league level this year. And then the rest of you guys see down there, Kevin Parado won 1-for-1 as well with a run scored and a walk. So nice to see Kevin, who did shed weight this offseason that we know. I believe he shedded north of 15 pounds after taking ice cream and other bad things just out of his diet and trying to really lock in for what is, in my opinion, a make or break year for Kevin Parada and the Mets organization, as if he's going to be anything for a bat-first catcher that the Mets drafted under Billy Epler, and has simply aged like milk since then for the most part, as Parada has been both a negative defender and bat so far for the majority of the minor leagues that he's experienced, outside of a decent stretch he had last year where he finally started to turn it on. But that's where you get on the offensive end, everybody. So now as we quickly transition into the pitching end, we're going to start here with my guy, Max Kranick. Max, who I'm going to show you guys in a second, I had the privilege of chopping it up with there And Mets Amazing Day. He chimed into my live show as I did a live show there at Amazing Day, and shout out my girlfriend for making it happen. I told her, go up to Max and say, hey, Wardy wants to talk to you. And then he came right up to me, which was really cool. But Kranick pitched 2 shutty today that we saw there. Kranick, who grew up a diehard Mets fan, actually grew up in the Scranton area. Hilarious considering I've grown up living in PA, not far from Scranton at all, but I'm originally from Long Island. My family, all from New York. We grew up Mets fans. Same thing with him, pretty much the exact same type of thing. And even though he grew up mainly going to Shea, not so much Citi Field. He was always a diehard Mets fan. So as I talked to Max, actually, at Mets Amazing Day a couple weeks ago, he said that was pretty surreal to be signing autographs next to his childhood hero growing up, and David Wright, among others. So it's still a pinch me moment for him, as he spoke to GKR after the fact, after his strong outing today through SNY, and he was pretty happy, kind of like a kid at a candy shop, talking to Keith, who he especially idolized growing up, and talked great things about. Even emphasized how the Endy Chavez catch that I actually have on the wall beside me too, it's just out of frame right now, the Endy Chavez catch back in 06 against the Cardinals was a key moment that Max remembers like it was yesterday there in his Mets fandom with the GKR booth. But he had himself a strong day today, and he will be looking to be a multi-inning reliever option for the Mets this season, as he was actually on their playoff roster in the NLDS. Many of you guys probably don't even know that, but he was on their playoff roster, just didn't get any innings at the end of the day. Tyler Zuber, who the Mets acquired in a trade with the Tampa Bay Rays last year, great story, was out of the minor leagues for a couple of years and worked his way back up with the Long Island Ducks in independent ball. Rays signed him, give him an opportunity. The Mets acquire him then, and he had himself a solid day. Did walk 3 guys we saw, but the fastball looked solid. I like the off-speed and breaking pitches there. And he did work out of a bases-loaded jam, so already some Houdini magic going on with our guys like Tyler Zuber. The rest, again, we have Mr. Ghost, and he's the big standout to me. He's a flame-throwing southpaw at a 1-2-3-5, sits 95 plus there on the gun. Originally drafted as a top outfield prospect a decade plus ago in Major League Baseball. Never panned out, so now I believe his first name is Anthony. Now he's a full-time reliever and has had Major League experience as a reliever and throws absolute gas. So the Mets are going to see if they could find a little bit of a lightning in a bottle here with their lab and with Ghost, who has a lot to give. We saw guys like Herget, Foster, and Geber round out the reliever front there for the Mets in their first matchup against the Miami Marlins, because then what we saw there against DC was Ty Adcock, a guy who will not be in this Mets bullpen this year, fingers crossed, got absolutely worked, couldn't even get out of the first, had himself 3 full counts that he ended up having a walk come out of it, so he was not able to get out of his own mess whatsoever. And Ty Adcock gives up 5 runs, 3 earned there that we see early on. Shook, who I'd be lying if I said who I knew who he was, reliever, comes in for the Mets right after, and he's pretty shook. Why? He tries to make a little toss there to first base to Ryan Clifford, and it goes over Ryan Clifford's head. It completely misses the underhand toss. 2 more runs score that way, so before the game even started, the Mets were going to lose to the Washington Nationals and their starting lineup. Grant Hartwig had a solid inning, including a pair of strikeouts. That's notable, considering Grant has had cups of coffee with the Mets over the past couple of years, and he could impact the bullpen this year, and the rest is what it is right there. So, in simple terms, we saw the Mets not have much on the offensive output today, but on the pitching output, I would definitely emphasize guys like Max Kranick stood out, and also to a degree in Tyler Zuber and his stuff there, Ghost and what you're getting, among others. So, it's certainly positives from the Mets and their spring training takeaways today, but still not too much to love, and that's why we're going to hope to see a lot more on the offensive end over the next couple days throughout the week that we cover these spring training games. Now, as we get back into the main slide here, everybody, and you guys see the highlights beside me once more, you see Jesse Winker doing his thing, as I alluded to. You're going to see guys obviously there, and Francisco Alvarez with the batting stance, Mark Vientos, Max Kranick as well, and actually I'll do a breakdown with you beside me as we do this before we talk about Nick Madrigal and Jose Iglesias, because that's poked oppo there that you guys would see then from Vientos. That was his first and only hit of the day. Now we see Max Kranick with a nice punchy 96 up and away there, does it for the inning. Tyler Zuber with a fantastic pickoff attempt there that we saw, which was awesome. And as I'm going through my notes right now, the Mets, who they faced actually was a southpaw that the Nationals acquired. I believe he's the first Japanese player that the Nationals have ever signed, coming over from the MPB. A soft-tossing southpaw that the Mets didn't really hit too much up against today. I'm not even going to try to announce his name because I know I'm going to butcher it. Tyrone Taylor was robbed in the early goings of the game against DC there, thanks to the wind blowing in on him. We saw Jesse Winker with the oppo. Cruz stole second base as Alvarez couldn't get the throw in the time that we saw in the first. Dylan Cruz, top prospect there for the Nationals, who will be making an impact for them as soon as this year. We saw that terrible flip there that led to the 5-0 early Nationals lead in the 1-2 games here. That's pretty much all she wrote when we look at the most notable takeaways from the DC game and the 1-1 tie. You had Sandy Alcantara throwing gas. That was pretty much that. We covered everything else to an absolute T. So now, guys, let's get into the big news, and probably in part why you clicked on this video, which has everything to do with what's going on with Nick Madrigal, because I was not a lover of the Nick Madrigal signing when it first happened, but I am by no means one of these people that wishes injury on anyone, even if it means that that injury could help increase the likelihood of said player landing with my team, that being a Jose Iglesias reunion. Max Kranick, as we were just talking about, by the way, this is him and us as we chopped it up. This is when he joined my live stream a couple weeks ago there at Mets Amazing Day. Check that out in case you guys haven't already. Has 10,000 views on the platform, and just scroll down the live streams. You'll find it after just a couple weeks. But as we see here, guys, what is happening is the following.
Madrigal and him having to come out in the first inning today.
Yeah, that he dislocated his left shoulder coming in on a ball. So he's going to get an MRI in the next 24 hours, and then we'll see what we got. So, but he dislocated his left shoulder.
So Madrigal has a legit dislocated left shoulder on a non-contact play. And just to show you how bizarre this entire sequence was, because it absolutely was, let me show you what happened here, everybody. So as you guys can see beside me, here is the play in real time. So Madrigal is the one charging in. I know it's kind of hard because it's small beside me, but Madrigal is the one playing shortstop. He's trying to charge in on a ball, and as soon as he tries to charge in on a ball, make the play, kind of slips and dives down at the end. Before you know it, Wyatt Young, as you can see, there is in the game. Why is Wyatt Young in the game? Is Nick Madrigal somehow, some way, absolutely dislocates the shoulder as he slipped and fell down. So that's clearly what happened here, is if we actually go back, and I'm going to pause it in real time when this was taking place. So there's Madrigal slipping. You see where his foot placement is? I know it's un poquito to see beside me, but he has both feet kind of lifted up in the air ever so slightly as he's trying to make this running throw to first base. And as he does so, you can see him kind of fall completely down the process. That's where the shoulder dislocates, and we're going to wait word over the next 24 hours on an MRI to see if he is going to be okay or if he's going to be out for an extended period of time. But to hear this news is beyond unfortunate. And as I alluded to already, I don't wish this on anyone. Even as someone who, if you guys have been following the platform, I have been beating the Jose Iglesias drum for a very long time now, but I think there's just been obvious reasons as to why we've been beating that drum, because if you're not going to bring in Jose Iglesias, you clearly are not going to be bringing him in now. Otherwise, it makes the endless sense to bring him in now. If you're the Mets, we cannot hear that in the coming days that the Mets have signed Jose Iglesias. Otherwise, it further proves exactly what the notion has been and what I've been trying to tell each and every one of you, which is the following. Even with the Mets saying that, yes, we would like flexibility and their utility positions off the bench, we would like guys with club control as well. Madrigal's on a split contract, not a guarantee, and does have minor league options. That's why he's more appealing. But for Jose Iglesias, who literally commented OMG after the Juan Soto home run yesterday on Instagram, the guy still feels like he's part of the team. He has made it abundantly clear he wants to be part of the team that we broke down over the past week. And I sit down with John Heyman last weekend, as he said it himself, until I sign with a different team, I feel like, I'm still here. Like, there's still an opportunity. And the reason as to why I'd say that there's a greater reality now more than ever, and Jose Iglesias reunion is common sense, everybody. If Nick Madrigal now has a cooked shoulder, if he's going to miss any extended time, and let's be frank, Madrigal having this shoulder issue means that his opportunity to crack this Mets roster now is slim. It's not impossible, but it's kind of slim to none happening right now to begin the year if he's going to miss any time, because this is a time to find out what these guys are made of. So when you have guys like Baty, Acuna, and others in-house options competing for a utility role right now, they're not going to have Nick Madrigal to compete against with if he's going to be dealing with this shoulder that he's going to have to rebuild and build himself back up from injury. Knowing that Madrigal is on this split contract means that this is far from a guarantee that he'll be here. And yes, while all the arguments are 1,000% true, the Mets not bringing in a guy like Jose Iglesias makes most sense because they want some flexibility at that position. But here's what's always been the wrong thing from the start. All the Mets have needed to do was bring Jose Iglesias back and not bring in Nick Madrigal. There's been reporting earlier this offseason that the Mets apparently approached Iglesias with a contract offer on a one-year deal. He said no, he just wants something that's a bit more fair, and he said he wants something a bit more fair. He said that in his interview with John Heyman, which tells me all I need to know. The Mets probably did approach him at least once, if not multiple times this offseason, but they haven't gone too far because Iglesias is looking for a solid payday, while he's a veteran, limited role for a Mets team that they don't want to give out guaranteed contracts to for a guy like him. And I know Iglesias meant everything with the OMG Mets and all the aura, all the vibes, and all the clutch hitting he did this past year, because the numbers speak for themselves down below. He was one of the most lethal, most clutch hitters for the Mets, not named Francisco Lindor, throughout the majority of the 162 last year. He was that good. And Jose Iglesias wants to return this Mets team. I think that's the most notable thing. Every single free agent that the Mets have parted with, they wanted to return. Jose Quintana, who the Mets are not bringing back as of now, thanks to recent reports, which I humbly disagree with. We'll see if that holds true or not. He's still out there in the market, and he's let it known that he wants to return the Mets. The Mets have shown a level of interest there, but that's since been refuted, so it's pretty much pick your poison as to who you want to believe between the debate of the Anthony Comos and the Pat Regazas of the world. But what I can tell you is that when it comes to Canelita, Mr. Jose Iglesias, Mr. OMG, this has been one of those drums that I will continue to beat until he signs elsewhere, because he himself has said it, and I will continue to say, until he signs elsewhere, he still feels like he's going to land with the Mets in the end. And this is why I told you guys over the past week, don't be shocked if we get into the first or second week of spring training and then the Mets sign Jose Iglesias if he's still out there. Why? Injuries inevitably happen. Look at the Mets' backup shortstop options. Brett Baty is their current backup shortstop option. Brett Baty has had no shortstop reps at the professional level in the minor leagues, yet he's now getting reps this spring training just to increase the versatility a little bit. I'm all for that, but the Mets are not going to look at Brett Baty as their true backup shortstop option the way that they will continue to look at Jose Iglesias as that, as long as they actually bring him back. So I think the simple counter is just bring Jose Iglesias back, bring him on the dollars. I'm sure that he'd be, I guarantee Jose Iglesias would take a decent pay cut to return the Mets versus signing elsewhere, even though he has a limited market for a veteran infielder who isn't getting any younger in his mid-30s. I understand all these factors, while also bearing in mind that this is a Mets team right now that can absolutely benefit from having someone like Jose Iglesias. To suggest that they should just stay in-house with their youngsters is not necessarily the best route. When why not have Jose to put the arm over the shoulder of the Acuñas, of the Batys of the world? Because even if you have to DFA Iglesias at some point this year because you need to make roster room, that's something the Mets can stomach doing the same way that they've been able to properly stomach not bringing back Jose Iglesias up until this point. Now I think push comes to shove, so if Nick Madrigal does miss any extended period of time, and Madrigal is going to be on the outside looking in to even crack this roster with the shoulder injury, the Mets are not going to put all the faith in Acuña and Baty. They want to give them a decent amount of reps, which is why there's still a reality that one, if not both, could still start the year in AAA for the Mets. As hard as that may be to fathom, all the more reason to bring in a guy like Iglesias. Yes, you don't have the minor league options, but you have someone who actually wants to be here and will be able to help you in any way you ask, whether that is in starting at second base every now and then, backing up for shortstop. Maybe Lindor has to leave the game early because that back is flared up and acting up throughout the course of the year or something. You want Jose Iglesias here. You want Jose to also be a guy to come off the bench in clutch situations. I absolutely would love to depend on him to give us a key single. When you have bases loaded 2 out there in the ninth, there are a few other guys I would want to fully trust on that bench. I know you're going to have Winker and Marte platoon DH. I know you're going to have Taylor and Siri platoon center field. But when looking at contact ability, no one even touches Jose Iglesias and what he would bring to this Mets team. Off the bench, in a starter role, however which way you want to utilize him, he is there for the taking. So David Stern, Steve Cohen, go out there and grab it while you still have a chance is what I have to say about that. But that's going to do it, everybody, for our breakdown. Thank you all so much for watching. Please let us know your key takeaways on the Port St. Lucie spring training games today, losing one and tying one as the other, as well as all the key takeaways on Sean Manaea, Jose Iglesias, and everything in between. Thank you guys again for the endless support. Smash those buttons on your way out. And this is your guy Wardy signing out. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace.